All right. So this is the video for chapter 14, which is all about instrument departures. Wanted to start with a departure from an airport like Bloomsburg. Now, one of the things that Rod will talk about is why do we have these departure procedures? Departing from Bloomsburg, at least for a little while, you're actually flying IFR in uncontrolled airspace. So what does that mean? That means that you need to avoid other traffic and you need to avoid obstacles. So in order to make that easier, we have things like departure procedures which might exist. Now, before I go there, just a reminder, you will file your flight plan, you'll do your run up and everything, you'll be ready to go. You're at the end of the runway. You can call up Wilkes-Barre, either on the phone or the radio. Phone is probably better. Tell them that you're ready to go. They're going to call you back and they're going to give you a clearance. They're going to tell you, do this initially. You're cleared to this fix. Your clearance is void if you're not off by this time. If you're not off by this time, contact us back by this time. It's one of those things where there's this little area and only one person at a time can be in that area if the weather's bad, especially because they don't have any control. So they can't allow more than one person in the uncontrolled airspace, if you will, at a time. So off you go and you depart and life is good, right? Now, when it comes to departing an untowered field like Bloomsburg, you might have an ODP, obstacle departure procedure. And what is this here for? This is here so that you don't run into stuff. If you look in your book, Rod talks about the fact that you've got this 40-to-1 path, this plane, if you will, for climbing. And if there's anything that intersects that path within 25 miles, then there's going to be a departure procedure. Now, that's in non-mountainous regions, by the way. Mountainous regions, they go out to 46 miles. If I look at the front of my approach plates, if I actually, bought them that way, instead of just downloading it like I did here, I'll see all of these listed. So here's Bloomsburg Municipal N13 takeoff minimums and obstacle departure procedures. That was amended in 16. It says takeoff minimums. Okay, takeoff minimums. What are those? Well, those are things that don't apply to you, Part 91. Those apply to Part 121 and Part 135 people. So you have to have certain minimums to take off, and you have to have standard minimums if you can climb 660 feet per nautical mile to 1400, and then it'll tell you some exceptions to that. Okay, so again, if you're a private pilot and you're just going at a Part 91 flight, you can take off 00 legally, but somewhat stupidly. Okay, so if I depart runway 9, says climbing left turn to heading 059 to 2200 before proceeding on course. Do not exceed 180 knots until established on that heading. Not a problem for most of us. Even if I was flying to Malibu at that altitude, I'm probably not going to get up to 180 knots yet. Certainly not while climbing. All right, runway 27, climb heading 254 to 2200 before proceeding on course. And then there's some notes. And this is just telling you where the different obstacles are. So this is very typical if you look at an untowered field. I can look further down here. For example, here's Bradford County. It's telling me a little bit about obstacles in that area. They don't actually have a departure procedure. But let's see who else does. There we go. Carlisle has a departure procedure as well. Some of these just have different takeoff minimums. Okay, so that's when you're taking off from an untowered field. And we've talked about this before. We said that if you take off from a towered field, IFR, life is way, way simpler. Now for the towered field, you might have a SID, a standard instrument departure, which, just like a star, you're not required to accept. You can tell them, I don't want to use a SID, and they'll try to give you some alternate routing. Just like a star, a start terminal arrival procedure, you can have the text version only, and you can still fly it. And there's also a graphical version. So here for Philadelphia, we have the Philadelphia 2 departure. You have all your frequencies. You have some common nearby fixes in the mix here. They have you going this direction, heading 245. And they have a list of the different takeoff minimums. One is actually continued onto a second page, and it tells you for takeoff on these runways, climbed heading assigned by ATC thence. It says exception, takeoff runway 27 left, 27 right, climbing left turn heading 245 thence. Expect radar vectors to the first nav aid fix, maintain 5,000 or assigned lower altitude. Expect clearance to filed altitude flight level within 10 minutes after departure. Then some special instructions as well. Now, if you look back here at this graphical depiction, this is very typical, where this picture doesn't really tell you much. The biggest thing that this picture tells you is the top altitude is 5,000 feet. So you're basically going to take off and do what they tell you. That's how simple it is. So a departure procedure is not all that big of a deal. And again, it's a lot easier. If you're at a big airport with a tower, even if they don't have a departure procedure, it's still easy. Where you go out, you're ready at the end, you call the tower, tell them you're ready, and they get you released, and you just take off, and there you go. You don't have to contact anybody. There's no void times or anything like that. So that is how you depart IFR. Again, the obstacle clearance is based on this 40-to-1 slope, which is 152 feet per nautical mile that you have to be able to climb. And if you look in the front of your approach plates, you will see a chart, kind of like what's on page 14-8 in your book, that shows you for different ground speeds how much your climb rate has to be. So let's say the gradient is 200 feet per nautical mile and you're climbing at 90 knots, then you need a 300 foot per minute climb rate. If you can't do that, you can't fly the approach, or I shouldn't say approach. More likely, you can't fly the departure procedure safely. Just like a star, if you want to fly a SID as part of your routing, you can just put in the SID. So here you can put in PHL2.PHL. And if there is an extension, then you can add that as well. So some of these SIDs will have an extension that says, hey, I'm going to go to this VOR or that VOR. And Philadelphia doesn't have such things. So that is pretty much departing IFR. This is one of the quickest chapters and topics in the book. So hopefully you're enjoying these things, and I will see you in our next video.